The enthusiasm of a divine surprise pervades our life, a mystic stir is felt, a thought from the eternal mind draws near, intimations cast from the invisible awaking from infinity's sleep come down, symbols of that which never yet was made. But soon the inert flesh responds no more, then sinks the sacred orgy of delight, the blaze of passion and the tide of power are taken from us and, though a glowing form abides astonishing earth, imagined supreme, too little of what was meant has left a trace. Earth's eyes half see, her forces half create, her rarest works are copies of heaven's art. A radiance of a golden artifice, a masterpiece of inspired device and rule, her forms hide what they house and only mime the unseized miracle of self-born shapes that live forever in the eternal's gaze. Here in a difficult half-finished world is a slow toiling of unconscious powers, here is man's ignorant divining mind, his genius born from an inconscient soil. To copy on earth's copies is his art. For when he strives for things surpassing earth, too rude the workman's tools, too crude his stuff, and hardly with his heart's blood he achieves his transient house of the divine idea, his figure of a time in for the unborn. Our being thrills with high-far memories and would bring down their dateless meanings here, but, too divine for earthly nature's scheme, beyond our reach the eternal marvels blaze. Absolute they dwell, unborn, immutable, immaculate in the spirit's deathless air, immortal in a world of motionless time and an unchanging muse of deep self-space. Only when we have climbed above ourselves, a line of the transcendent meets our road and joins us to the timeless and the true, it brings to us the inevitable word, the godlike act, the thoughts that never die. A ripple of light and glory wraps the brain, and traveling down the moment's vanishing route the figures of eternity arrive. As the mind's visitors or the heart's guests they espouse our mortal brevity awhile, or seldom in some rare delivering glimpse are caught by our vision's delicate surmise. Although beginnings only and first attempts, these glimmerings point to the secret of our birth and the hidden miracle of our destiny. What we are there and here on earth shall be as imaged in a contact and a call. As yet earth's imperfection is our sphere, our nature's glass shows not our real self, that greatness still abides held back within. Earth's doubting future hides our heritage, the light now distant shall grow native here, the strength that visits us our comrade power, the ineffable shall find a secret voice, the imperishable burn through matter's screen making this mortal body Godhead's robe. The Spirit's greatness is our timeless source and it shall be our crown in endless time. A vast unknown is round us and within, all things are wrapped in the dynamic one, a subtle link of union joins all life. Thus all creation is a single chain, we are not left alone in a closed scheme between a driving of inconscient force and an incommunicable absolute. Our life is a spur in a sublime soul range, our being looks beyond its walls of mind and it communicates with greater worlds, there are brighter earths and wider heavens than ours. There are realms where being broods in its own depths, it feels in its immense dynamic core its nameless, unformed, unborn potencies cry for expression in the unshaped vast, ineffable beyond ignorance and death, the images of its everlasting truth look out from a chamber of its self-wrapped soul, as if to its own inner witness gaze the spirit holds up its mirrored self and works, the power and passion of its timeless heart, the figures of its formless ecstasy, the grandeurs of its multitudinous might. Thence comes the mystic substance of our souls into the prodigy of our nature's birth, there is the unfallen height of all we are and dateless fount of all we hope to be. On every plane the hieratic power, initiate of unspoken verities, dreams to transcribe and make a part of life in its own native style and living tongue some trait of the perfection of the unborn, some vision seen in the omniscient light, some far tone of the immortal rhapsodist voice, some rapture of the all-creating bliss, some form and plan of the beauty unutterable. Worlds are there nearer to those absolute realms, where the response to truth is swift and sure and spirit is not hampered by its frame and hearts by sharp division seized and rent and delight and beauty are inhabitants and love and sweetness are the law of life. A finer substance in a subtler mold embodies the divinity earth but dreams, its strength can overtake joy's running feet, overleaping the fixed hurdles set by time, the rapid net of an intuitive clasp captures the fugitive happiness we desire. A nature lifted by a larger breath, plastic and passive to the all-shaping fire, answers the flaming Godhead's casual touch, immune from our inertia of response. It hears the word to which our hearts are deaf, adopts the seeing of immortal eyes, and, traveler on the roads of line and hue, pursues the spirit of beauty to its home. Thus we draw near to the all-wonderful, following his rapture in things as sign and guide. Beauty is his footprint showing us where he has passed, love is his heartbeat's rhythm in mortal breasts, happiness the smile on his adorable face. A communion of spiritual entities, a genius of creative immanence, makes all creation deeply intimate, a fourth dimension of aesthetic sense where all is in ourselves, ourselves in all, to the cosmic wideness realigns our souls. A kindling rapture joins the seer and seen, the craftsman and the craft grown inly one achieve perfection by the magic throb and passion of their close identity. All that we slowly piece from gathered parts, or by long labor stumblingly evolve, is their self-born by its eternal right. In us too the intuitive fire can burn, an agent light, it is coiled in our folded hearts, on the celestial levels is its home, descending, it can bring those heavens here. But rarely burns the flame nor burns for long, the joy it calls from those diviner heights brings brief magnificent reminiscences and high splendid glimpses of interpreting thought, but not the utter vision and delight. A veil is kept, something is still held back, lest, captives of the beauty and the joy, our souls forget to the highest to aspire. I in that fair subtle realm behind our own the form is all, and physical gods are kings. The inspiring light plays in fine boundaries, a faultless beauty comes by nature's grace, their liberty is perfection's guarantee, although the absolute image lacks, the word incarnate, the sheer spiritual ecstasy, all is a miracle of symmetric charm, a fantasy of perfect line and rule. They all feel satisfied in themselves and whole, a rich completeness is by limit made, marvel in an utter littleness abounds, an intricate rapture riots in a small space, each rhythm is kin to its environment, each line is perfect and inevitable, each object faultlessly built for charm and use. All is enamored of its own delight. Intact it lives of its perfection sure in a heaven-pleased self-glad immunity, content to be, it has need of nothing more. Here was not futile effort's broken heart, exempt from the ordeal and the test, empty of opposition and of pain, it was a world that could not fear nor grieve. It had no grace of error or defeat, it had no room for fault, no power to fail. Out of some packed self-bliss it drew at once its form discoveries of the mute idea and the miracle of its rhythmic thoughts and acts, its clear technique of firm and rounded lives, its gracious people of inanimate shapes and glory of breathing bodies like our own. Amazed, his senses ravished with delight, he moved in a divine, yet kindred world admiring marvelous forms so near to ours yet perfect like the playthings of a god, deathless in the aspect of mortality. In their narrow and exclusive absolutes the finite's rank supremacies throned abide, it dreams not ever of what might have been, only in boundaries can this absolute live. In a supremeness bound to its own plan where all was finished and no widths were left, no space for shadows of the immeasurable, no room for the incalculable surprise, a captive of its own beauty and ecstasy, in a magic circle wrought the enchanted might. The spirit stood back effaced behind its frame. Admired for the bright finality of its lines, a blue horizon limited the soul, thought moved in luminous facilities, the outer ideal's shallows its swim range, life in its boundaries lingered satisfied with the small happiness of the body's acts. Assigned as force to a bound corner mind, attached to the safe paucity of her room, she did her little works and played and slept and thought not of a greater work undone. Forgetful of her violent vast desires, forgetful of the heights to which she rose, her walk was fixed within a radiant groove. The beautiful body of a soul at ease, like one who laughs in sweet and sunlit groves, childlike she swung in her gold cradle of joy. The space's call reached not her charmed abode, she had no wings for wide and dangerous flight, she faced no peril of sky or of abyss, she knew no vistas and no mighty dreams, no yearning for her lost infinitudes. A perfect picture in a perfect frame, this fairy artistry could not keep his will, only a moment's fine release it gave, a careless hour was spent in a slight bliss. Our spirit tires of being surfaces, transcended is the splendor of the form, it turns to hidden powers and deeper states. So now he looked beyond for greater light. His soul's peak climb abandoning in its rear this brilliant courtyard of the House of Days, he left the fine material paradise. His destiny lay beyond in larger space. Canto 3. The Glory and the Fall of Life. An uneven broad ascent now lord his feet. Answering a greater nature's troubled call, he crossed the limits of embodied mind and entered wide obscure disputed fields where all was doubt and change and nothing sure, a world of search and toil without repose. As one who meets the face of the unknown, a questioner with none to give reply, attracted to a problem never solved, always uncertain of the ground he trod, always drawn on to an inconstant goal, he traveled through a land peopled by doubts in shifting confines on a quaking base. In front he saw a boundary ever unreached and thought himself at each step nearer now, a far retreating horizon of mirage. A vagrancy was there that brooked no home, a journey of countless paths without a close. Nothing he found to satisfy his heart, a tireless wandering sought and could not cease. Their life is the manifest incalculable, a movement of unquiet seas, a long and venturous leap of spirit into space, a vexed disturbance in the eternal calm, an impulse and passion of the infinite. Assuming whatever shape her fancy wills, escaped from the restraint of settled forms, she has left the safety of the tried and known. Unshepherded by the fear that walks through time, undaunted by fate that dogs and chance that springs, she accepts disaster as a common risk, careless of suffering, heedless of sin and fall, she wrestles with danger and discovery in the unexplored expanses of the soul. To be seemed only a long experiment, the hazard of a seeking ignorant force that tries all truths and, finding none supreme, moves on unsatisfied, unsure of its end. As saw some inner mind, so life was shaped, from thought to thought she passed, from phase to phase, tortured by her own powers, all proud and blessed, now master of herself, now toy and slave. A huge inconsequence was her action's law, as if all possibility must be drained, and anguish and bliss were pastimes of the heart. In a gallop of thunder-hooved vicissitudes she swept through the racefields of circumstance, or, swaying, she tossed between her heights and deeps, uplifted or broken on time's inconstant wheel. Amid a tedious crawl of drab desires she writhed, a worm mid worms in nature's mud, then, Titan, statured, took all earth for food, ambitioned the seas for robe, for crown the stars and shouting strode from peak to giant peak, clamoring for worlds to conquer and to rule. Then, wantonly enamored of sorrow's face, she plunged into the anguish of the depths and, wallowing, clung to her own misery. In dolorous converse with her squandered self she wrote the account of all that she had lost, or sat with grief as with an ancient friend. A romp of violent raptures soon was spent, or she lingered tied to an inadequate joy, missing the turns of fate, missing life's goal. A scene was planned for all her numberless moods where each could be the law and way of life, but none could offer a pure felicity, only a flickering zest they left behind or the fierce lust that brings a dead fatigue. Amid her swift untold variety something remained dissatisfied, ever the same, and in the new saw only a face of the old, for every hour repeated all the rest and every change prolonged the same unease. A spirit of herself an aim unsure, tired soon of too much joy and happiness, she needs the spur of pleasure and of pain and the native taste of suffering and unrest, she strains for an end that never can she win. A perverse savour haunts her thirsting lips, for the grief she weeps which came from her own choice, for the pleasure yearns that racked with wounds her breast, aspiring to heaven she turns her steps towards hell. Chance she has chosen and danger for playfellows, fate's dreadful swing she has taken for cradle and seat. Yet pure and bright from the timeless was her birth, a lost world rapture lingers in her eyes, her moods are faces of the infinite, beauty and happiness are her native right, and endless bliss is her eternal home. This now revealed its antique face of joy, a sudden disclosure to the heart of grief tempting it to endure and long and hope. Even in changing worlds bereft of peace, in an air racked with sorrow and with fear, and while his feet trod on a soil unsafe, he saw the image of a happier state. In an architecture of hieratic space circling and mounting towards creation's tops, at a blue height which never was too high for warm communion between body and soul, as far as heaven, as near as thought and hope, glimmered the kingdom of a griefless life. Above him, in a new celestial vault other than the heavens beheld by mortal eyes, as on a fretted ceiling of the gods, an archipelago of laughter and fire, swam stars apart in a rippled sea of sky. Towered spirals, magic rings of vivid hue and gleaming spheres of strange felicity floated through distance like a symbol world. On the trouble and the toil they could not share, on the unhappiness they could not aid, impervious to life's suffering, struggle, grief, untarnished by its anger, gloom and hate, unmoved, untouched, look down great visioned plains blissful forever in their timeless right. Absorbed in their own beauty and content, of their immortal gladness they live sure. Apart in their self-glory plunged, remote burning they swam in a vague lucent haze, an everlasting refuge of dreamlight, a nebula of the splendors of the gods made from the musings of eternity. Almost unbelievable by human faith, hardly they seemed the stuff of things that are. As through a magic television's glass outline to some magnifying inner eye they shone like images thrown from afar, seen too high and glad for mortal lids to seize. But near and real to the longing heart and to the body's passionate thought and sense are the hidden kingdoms of beatitude. In some close unattained realm which yet we feel, immune from the harsh clutch of death and time, escaping the search of sorrow and desire, in dream and trance and muse before our eyes, across a subtle vision's inner field, wide rapturous landscapes fleeting from the sight, the figures of the perfect kingdom pass and behind them leave a shining memory's trail. Imagined scenes or great eternal worlds, dream-caught or sensed, they touch our hearts with their depths, unreal seeming, yet more real than life, happier than happiness, truer than things true. If dreams these were all captured images, dreams truth made false earth's vain realities. In a swift eternal moment fixed there live or ever recalled come back to longing eyes calm heavens of imperishable light, illumined continents of violet peace, oceans and rivers of the mirth of God and griefless countries under purple suns. This, once a star of bright remote idea or imagination's comet trail of dream, took now a close shape of reality. The gulf between dream truth, earth fact was crossed, the wonder worlds of life were dreams no more. His vision made all they unveiled its own, their scenes, their happenings met his eyes and heart and smote them with pure loveliness and bliss. A breathless summit region drew his gaze whose boundaries jutted into a sky of self and dipped towards a strange ethereal base. The quintessence glowed of life's supreme delight. On a spiritual and mysterious peak only a miracle's high transfiguring line divided life from the formless infinite and sheltered time against eternity. Out of that formless stuff time mints his shapes, the eternal's quiet holds the cosmic act, the protean images of the world force have drawn the strength to be, the will to last from a deep ocean of dynamic peace. Inverting the spirit's apex towards life, she spends the plastic liberties of the one to cast in acts the dreams of her caprice, his wisdom's cool steadies her careless feet, he props her dance upon a rigid base. His timeless still immutability must standardize her creation's miracle. Out of the void's unseeing energies inventing the scene of a concrete universe, by his thought she has fixed its paces, in its blind acts she sees by flashes of his all-knowing light. At her will the inscrutable supermind leans down to guide her force that feels but cannot know, its breath of power controls her restless seas and life obeys the governing idea. At her will, led by a luminous immanence the hazardous experimenting mind pushes its way through obscure possibles mid-chance formations of an unknowing world. Our human ignorance moves towards the truth that nescience may become omniscient, transmuted instincts shape to divine thoughts, thoughts house infallible immortal sight and nature climb towards God's identity. The master of the world's self made her slave is the executor of her fantasies. She has canalized the seas of omnipotence, she has limited by her laws the illimitable. The immortal bound himself to do her works, he labors at the tasks her ignorance sets, hidden in the cape of our mortality. The worlds, the forms her goddess fancy makes have lost their origin on unseen heights, even severed, straying from their timeless source, even deformed, obscure, accursed and fallen, since even fall has its perverted joy and nothing she leaves out that serves delight. These too can to the peaks revert or here cut out the sentence of the spirit's fall, recover their forfeited divinity. At once caught in an eternal vision sweep he saw her pride and splendor of highborn zones and her regions crouching in the nether deeps. Above was a monarchy of unfallen self, beneath was the gloomy trance of the abyss, an opposite pole or dim antipodes. There were vasts of the glory of life's absolutes, all laughed in a safe immortality and an eternal childhood of the soul before darkness came and pain and grief were born where all could dare to be themselves and one and wisdom played in sinless innocence with naked freedom in truth's happy Sunday. There were worlds of her laughter and dreadful irony, there were fields of her taste of toil and strife and tears, her head lay on the breast of amorous death, sleep imitated a while extinction's peace. The light of God she has parted from his dark to test the savor of bare opposites. Here mingling in man's heart their tones and hues have woven his being's mutable design, his life a forward rippling stream in time, his nature's constant fixed mobility, his soul a moving picture's changeful film, his cosmos chaos of personality. But here were worlds lifted halfway to heaven. The veil was there but not the shadowy wall. In forms not too remote from human grasp some passion of the inviolate purity broke through, a ray of the original bliss. Heaven's joys might have been earth's if earth were pure. There could have reached our divinized sense and heart some natural felicity's bright extreme, some thrill of supernature's absolutes. All strengths could laugh and sport on earth's hard roads and never feel her cruel edge of pain. All love could play and nowhere nature's shame. But she has stabled her dreams in matter's courts and still her doors are barred to things supreme. These worlds could feel God's breath visiting their tops, some glimmer of the transcendence hem was there. Across the white aeonic silences immortal figures of embodied joy traversed wide spaces near to eternity's sleep. Pure mystic voices in beatitude's hush appealed to love's immaculate sweetnesses, calling his honeyed touch to thrill the worlds, his blissful hands to seize on nature's limbs, his sweet intolerant might of union to take all beings into his savior arms, drawing to his pity the rebel and the waif to force on them the happiness they refuse. A chant hymeneal to the unseen divine, a flaming rhapsody of white desire lured an immortal music into the heart and woke the slumbering ear of ecstasy. A purer, fierier sense had there its home, a burning urge no earthly limbs can hold. One drew a large unburdened spacious breath and the heart sped from beat to rapturous beat. The voice of time sang of the immortal's joy, an inspiration and a lyric cry. The moments came with ecstasy on their wings, beauty unimaginable moved heaven bare absolved from boundaries in the vasts of dream. The cry of the birds of wonder called from the skies to the deathless people of the shores of light. Creation leaped straight from the hands of God, marvel and rapture wandered in the ways. Only to be was a supreme delight, life was a happy laughter of the soul and joy was king with love for minister. The spirit's luminousness was bodied there. Life's contraries were lovers or natural friends and her extremes keen edges of harmony. Indulgence with a tender purity came and nursed the God on her maternal breast. There none was weak, so fostered could not live. Ignorance was a thin shade protecting light, imagination the free will of truth. Pleasure a candidate for heaven's fire, the intellect was beauty's worshipper, strength was the slave of calm spiritual law, power laid its head upon the breasts of bliss. There were summit glories inconceivable, autonomies of wisdom's still self-rule and high dependencies of her virgin son, illumined theocracies of the seeing soul throned in the power of the transcendence ray. A vision of grandeurs, a dream of magnitudes in sun-bright kingdoms moved with regal gait. Assemblies, crowded senates of the gods, life's puissances reigned on seats of marble will, high dominations and autocracies and laureled strengths and armed imperative mights. All objects there were great and beautiful, all beings were a royal stamp of power. There sat the oligarchies of natural law, proud violent heads served one calm monarch brow, all the soul's postures donned divinity. There met the ardent mutual intimacies of mastery's joy and the joy of servitude imposed by love on love's heart that obeys and love's body held beneath a rapturous yoke. All was a game of meeting kinglinesses. For worship lifts the worshipper's bowed strength close to the God's pride and bliss his soul adores. The ruler there is one with all he rules, to him who serves with a free equal heart obedience is his princely training school, his nobility's coronet and privilege, his faith is a high nature's idiom, his service a spiritual sovereignty. There were realms where knowledge joined creative power in her high home and made her all his own. The grand illuminate seized her gleaming limbs and filled them with the passion of his ray till all her body was its transparent house and all her soul a counterpart of his soul. Apotheosized, transfigured by wisdom's touch, her days became a luminous sacrifice, an immortal moth in happy and endless fire, she burned in his sweet intolerable blaze. A captive life wedded her conqueror. In his wide sky she built her world anew, she gave to mind's calm pace the motor's speed, to thinking a need to live what the soul saw, to living an impetus to know and see. His splendor grasped her puissance to him clung, she crowned the idea a king in purple robes, put her magic serpent scepter in thought's grip, made forms his inward vision's rhythmic shapes and her axe the living body of Hesa flaming thunder, a creator flash, his victor light rode on her deathless force, a centaur's mighty gallop bore the god. Life throned with mind, a double majesty. Worlds were there of a happiness great and grave and action tinged with dream, laughter with thought, and passion there could wait for its desire until it heard the near approach of God. Worlds were there of a childlike mirth and joy, a carefree youthfulness of mind and heart found in the body a heavenly instrument, it lit an aureate halo round desire and freed the deified animal in the limbs to divine gambols of love and beauty and bliss. On a radiant soil that gazed at heaven's smile a swift life impulse stinted not nor stopped, it knew not how to tire, happy were its tears. Their work was play and play the only work, the tasks of heaven a game of godlike might, a celestial bacchanal forever pure, unstayed by faintness as in mortal frames life was an eternity of rapture's moods, age never came, care never lined the face. Imposing on the safety of the stars a race and laughter of immortal strengths, the nude godchildren in their playfields ran smiting the winds with splendor and with speed, of storm and sun they made companions, sported with the white manner of tossing seas, slew distance trampled to death under their wheels and wrestled in the arenas of their force. Imperious in their radiance like the suns they kindled heaven with the glory of their limbs flung like a divine largesse to the world. A spell to force the heart to stark delight, as if life's banner on the roads of space. Ideas were luminous comrades of the soul, mind played with speech, cast javelins of thought, but needed not these instruments toil to know, knowledge was nature's pastime like the rest. Investitured with the fresh heart's bright ray, an early god, instinct's child inheritors, tenants of the perpetuity of time still thrilling with the first creation's bliss, they steeped existence in their youth of soul. An exquisite and vehement tyranny, the strong compulsion of their will to joy poured smiling streams of happiness through the world. There reigned a breath of high immune content, a fortunate gate of days in tranquil air, a flood of universal love and peace. A sovereignty of tireless sweetness lived like a song of pleasure on the lips of time. A large spontaneous order freed the will, a some frank winging of the soul to bliss, the breadth and greatness of the unfettered act and the swift fire, heart's golden liberty. There was no facet of soul severance, there came no crookedness of thought or word to rob creation of its native truth, all was sincerity and natural force. Their freedom was sole rule and highest law. In a happy series climbed or plunged these worlds, in realms of curious beauty and surprise, in fields of grandeur and of Titan power, life played at ease with her immense desires. 1,000 Edens she could build nor pause, no bound was set to her greatness and to her grace and to her heavenly variety. Smiling like a newborn child at love and hope, in her nature housing the immortal's power, in her bosom bearing the eternal will, no guide she needed but her luminous heart, no fall debased the godhead of her steps, no alien night had come to blind her eyes. There was no use for grudging ring or fence, each act was a perfection and a joy. Abandoned to her rapid fancies, moods, and the rich colored riot of her mind, initiative divine and mighty dreams, magician builder of unnumbered forms exploring the measures of the rhythms of God, at will she wove her wizard wonder dance, a Dionysian goddess of delight, a bacchant of creative ecstasy. This world of bliss he saw and felt its call, but found no way to enter into its joy. Across the conscious gulf there was no bridge. A darker air encircled still his soul, tied to an image of unquiet life. In spite of yearning mind and longing sense, to a sad thought by grey experience formed and a vision dimmed by care and sorrow and sleep, all this seemed only a bright desirable dream conceived in a longing distance by the heart of one who walks in the shadow of earth pain. Although he once had felt the Eternal's clasp, too near to suffering worlds his nature lived, and where he stood were entrances of night. Hardly, too close beset by the world's care, can the dense mold in which we have been made return sheer joy to joy, pure light to light. For its tormented will to think and live first to a mingled pain and pleasure woke, and still it keeps the habit of its birth. A dire duality is our way to be. In the crude beginnings of this mortal world, life was not nor mind's play nor heart's desire. When earth was built in the unconscious void and nothing was save a material scene, identified with sea and sky and stone, her young gods yearned for the release of souls asleep in objects, vague, inanimate. In that desolate grandeur, in that beauty bare, in the deaf stillness, mid the unheeded sounds, heavy was the uncommunicated load of Godhead in a world that had no needs, for none was there to feel or to receive. This solid mass which brooked no throb of sense could not contain their vast creative urge, immersed no more in matter's harmony, the spirit lost its statuesque repose. In the uncaring trance it groped for sight, passioned for the movements of a conscious heart, famishing for speech and thought and joy and love, in the dumb insensitive wheeling day and night hungered for the beat of yearning and response. The poised in conscience shaken with a touch, the intuitive silence trembling with a name, they cry to life to invade the senseless mold and in brute forms awake divinity. A voice was heard on the mute rolling globe, a murmur moaned in the unlistening void. A being seemed to breathe where once was none, something pent up in dead insentient depths, denied conscious existence, lost to joy, turned as if one asleep since dateless time. Aware of its own buried reality, remembering its forgotten self and right, it yearned to know, to aspire, to enjoy, to live. Life heard the call and left her native light. Overflowing from her bright magnificent plane on the rigid coil and sprawl of mortal space, here too the gracious great-winged angel poured her splendor and her swiftness and her bliss, hoping to fill a fair new world with joy. As comes a goddess to a mortal's breast and fills his days with her celestial clasp, she stooped to make her home in transient shapes, in matter's womb she cast the immortal's fire, in the unfeeling vast woke thought and hope, smote with her charm and beauty flesh and nerve and forced delight on earth's insensible frame. Alive and clad with trees and herbs and flowers, earth's great brown body smiled towards the skies, azure replied to azure in the sea's laugh, new sentient creatures filled the unseen depths, life's glory and swiftness ran in the beauty of beasts, man dared and thought and met with his soul the world. But while the magic breath was on its way, before her gifts could reach our prisoned hearts, a dark ambiguous presence questioned all. The secret will that robes itself with night and offers to spirit the ordeal of the flesh, imposed a mystic mask of death and pain. Interned now in the slow and suffering years sojourns the winged and wonderful wayfarer and can no more recall her happier state, but must obey the inerting conscience law, insensible foundation of a world in which blind limits are on beauty laid and sorrow and joy as struggling comrades live. A dim and dreadful muteness fell on her, abolished was her subtle mighty spirit and slain her boon of child God happiness, and all her glory into and all her sweetness into a maimed desire. To feed death with her works is here life's doom. So veiled was her immortality that she seemed, inflicting consciousness on unconscious things, an episode in an eternal death, a myth of being that must forever cease. Such was the evil mystery of her change. Canto 4. The Kingdoms of the Little Life. A quivering, trepidant, uncertain world born from that dolorous meeting. An eclipse appeared in the emptiness where her feet had trod, a quick obscurity, a seeking stir. There was a writhing of half-conscious force hardly awakened from the inconscient sleep, tied to an instinct-driven ignorance, to find itself and find its hold on things. Inheritor of poverty and loss, assailed by memories that fled when seized, haunted by a forgotten uplifting hope, it strove with a blindness as of groping hands to fill the aching and disastrous gap between earth pain and the bliss from which life fell. A world that ever seeks for something missed, hunts for the joy that earth has failed to keep. Too near to our gates its unappeased unrest for peace to live on the inert solid globe, it has joined its hunger to the hunger of earth, it has given the law of craving to our lives, it has made our spirits need a fathomless gulf. An influence entered mortal night and day, a shadow overcast the time-born race, in the troubled stream where leaps a blind heart pulse and the nerve-beat of feeling wakes in sense-dividing matters sleep from conscious mind, there strayed a call that knew not why it came. A power beyond earth's scope has touched the earth, the repose that might have been can be no more, a formless yearning passions in man's heart, a cry is in his blood for happier things, else could he roam on a free sunlit soil with the childlike pain-forgetting mind of beasts or live happy, unmoved, like flowers and trees. The might that came upon the earth to bless, has stayed on earth to suffer and aspire. The infant laugh that rang through time is hushed, man's natural joy of life is overcast and sorrow is his nurse of destiny. The animal's thoughtless joy is left behind, care and reflection burden his daily walk, he has risen to greatness and to discontent, he is awake to the invisible. Insatiate seeker, he has all to learn, he has exhausted now life's surface acts, his being's hidden realms remain to explore. He becomes a mind, he becomes a spirit and self, in his fragile tenement he grows nature's lord. In him matter wakes from its long obscure trance, in him earth feels the Godhead drawing near. An eyeless power that sees no more its aim, a restless hungry energy of will, life cast her seed in the body's indolent mold, it woke from happy torpor a blind force compelling it to sense and seek and feel. In the enormous labor of the void perturbing with her dreams the vast routine and dead roll of a slumbering universe the mighty prisoner struggled for release. Alive with her yearning woke the inert cell, in the heart she kindled a fire of passion and need, amid the deep calm of inanimate things arose her great voice of toil and prayer and strife. A groping consciousness in a voiceless world, a guideless sense was given her for her road, thought was withheld and nothing now she knew, but all the unknown was hers to feel and obeying the push of unborn things towards birth out of her seal of insentient life she broke, in her substance of unthinking mute soul strength that cannot utter what its depths divine, awoke a blind necessity to know. The chain that bound her she made her instrument, instinct was hers, the chrysalis of truth, an effort and growth and striving nescience. Inflicting on the body desire and hope, imposing on inconscience consciousness, she brought into matter's dull tenacity her anguished claim to her lost sovereign right, her tireless search, her vexed uneasy heart, her wandering unsure steps, her cry for change. Adorer of a joy without a name, in her obscure cathedral of delight to dim dwarf gods she offers secret rites. But vain unending is the sacrifice, the priest an ignorant mage who only makes futile mutations in the altar's plan and casts blind hopes into a powerless flame. A burden of transient gains weighs down her steps and hardly under that load can she advance, but the hours cry to her, she travels on passing from thought to thought, from want to want, her greatest progress is a deepened need. Matter dissatisfies, she turns to mind, she conquers earth, her field, then claims the heavens. Insensible, breaking the work she has done the stumbling ages over her labor pass, but still no great transforming light came down and no revealing rapture touched her fall. In nescience began her mighty task, in ignorance she pursues the unfinished work, for knowledge gropes, but meets not wisdom's face. Ascending slowly with unconscious steps, a foundling of the gods she wanders here like a child soul left near the gates of hell fumbling through fog in search of paradise. In this slow ascension he must follow her pace even from her faint and dim subconscious start, so only can earth's last salvation come. For so only could he know the obscure cause of all that holds us back and baffles God in the jail delivery of the imprisoned soul. Along swift paths of fall through dangerous gates he chanced into a grey obscurity teeming with instincts from the mindless gulfs that pushed to wear a form and win a place. Life here was intimate with death, and night and ate death's food that she might breathe a while. She was their inmate and adopted waif. Accepting subconscience, in dumb darkness reign a sojourner, she hoped not any more. There far away from truth and luminous thought he saw the original seat, the separate birth of the dethroned, deformed and suffering power. An unhappy face of falsity made true, a contradiction of our divine birth, indifferent to beauty and to light, parading she flaunted her animal disgrace unhelped by camouflage, brutal and bare, an authentic image recognized and signed of her outcast force exiled from heaven and hope, fallen, glorying in the vileness of her state, the grovel of a strength once half divine, the graceless squalor of her beast desires, the staring visage of her ignorance, the naked body of her poverty. Here first she crawled out from her cabin of mud where she had lain inconscient, rigid, mute, its narrowness and torpor held her still, a darkness clung to her uneffaced by light. There neared no touch redeeming from above, the upward look was alien to her sight, forgotten the fearless godhead of her walk, renounced was the glory and felicity, the adventure in the dangerous fields of time, hardly she availed, wallowing, to bear and live. A wide unquiet mist of seeking space, a rayless region swallowed in vague swathes, that seemed, unnamed, unbodied and unhoused, a swaddled visionless and formless mind, asked for a body to translate its soul. Its prayer denied, it fumbled after thought. As yet not powered to think, hardly to live, it opened into a weird and pygmy world where this unhappy magic had its source. On dim confines where life and matter meet he wandered among things half seen, half guessed, pursued by ungrasped beginnings and lost ends. Their life was born but died before it could live. There was no solid ground, no constant drift, only some flame of mindless will had power. Himself was dim to himself, half felt, obscure, as if in a struggle of the void to be. In strange domains where all was living sense but mastering thought was not nor cause nor rule, only a crude child heart cried for toys of bliss, mind flickered, a disordered infant glow, and random shapeless energies drove towards form and took each wisp fire for a guiding Sunday. This blindfold force could place no thinking step, asking for light she followed darkness clue. An inconscient power groped towards consciousness, matter smitten by matter glimmered to sense, blind contacts, slow reactions beat out sparks of instinct from a cloaked subliminal bed, sensations crowded, dumb substitutes for thought, perception answered nature's wakening blows but still was a mechanical response, a jerk, a leap, a start in nature's dream, and rude unchastened impulses jostling ran heedless of every motion but their own and, darkling, clashed with darker than themselves, free. In a world of settled anarchy, the need to exist, the instinct to survive engrossed the tense precarious moments will and an unseeing desire felt out for food. The gusts of nature were the only law, force wrestled with force, but no result remained, only were achieved a nescient grasp and drive and feelings and instincts knowing not their source, sense, pleasures and sense pangs soon caught, soon lost, and the brute motion of unthinking lives. It was a vain unnecessary world whose will to be brought poor and sad results and meaningless suffering and a grey unease. Nothing seemed worth the labour to become. But judged not so his spirit's wakened eye. As shines a solitary witness star that burns apart, light's lonely sentinel, in the drift and teeming of a mindless night, a single thinker in an aimless world awaiting some tremendous dawn of God, he saw the purpose in the works of time. Even in that aimlessness a work was done pregnant with magic will and change divine. The first writhings of the cosmic serpent force uncoiled from the mystic ring of matter's trance, it raised its head in the warm air of life. It could not cast off yet night's stiffening sleep or wear as yet mind's wonderflecks and streaks, put on its jeweled hood the crown of soul or stand erect in the blaze of spirit Sunday as yet were only seen foulness and force, the secret crawl of consciousness to light through a fertile slime of lust and battening sense, beneath the body's crust of thickened self, a tardy fervent working in the dark, the turbid yeast of nature's passionate change, ferment of the soul's creation out of mire. A heavenly process donned this grey disguise, a fallen ignorance in its covert night labored to achieve its dumb unseemly work, a camouflage of the inconscious need to release the glory of God in nature's mud. His sight, spiritual in embodying orbs, could pierce through the grey phosphorescent haze and scan the secrets of the shifting flux that animates these mute and solid cells and leads the thought and longing of the flesh and the keen lust and hunger of its will. This too he tracked along its hidden stream and traced its acts to a miraculous fount. A mystic presence none can probe nor rule, creator of this game of ray and shade in this sweet and bitter paradoxical life, asks from the body the soul's intimacies and by the swift vibration of a nerve links its mechanic throbs to light and love. It summons the spirit's sleeping memories oblivious of their flame of happy truth, arriving with heavy eyes that hardly see, they come disguised as feelings and desires, like weeds upon the surface float a while and rise and sink on a somnambulous tide. Impure, degraded though her motions are, always a heaven truth broods in life's deeps, in her obscurest members burns that fire. A touch of God's rapture in creation's acts, a lost remembrance of felicity lurks still in the dumb roots of death and birth, the world's senseless beauty mirrors God's delight. That rapture's smile is secret everywhere, it flows in the wind's breath, in the tree's sap, its hued magnificence blooms in leaves and flowers. When life broke through its half-drowse in the plant that feels and suffers but cannot move or cry, in beast and in winged bird and thinking man it made of the heart's rhythm its music's beat, it forced the unconscious tissues to awake and ask for happiness and earn the pang and thrill with pleasure and laughter of brief delight, and quiver with pain and crave for ecstasy. Imperative, voiceless, ill-understood, too far from light, too close to being's core, born strangely in time from the eternal bliss, it presses on heart's core and vibrant nerve, its sharp self-seeking tears our consciousness, our pain and pleasure have that sting for cause, instinct with it, but blind to its true joy the soul's desire leaps out towards passing things. All nature's longing drive none can resist, comes surging through the blood and quickened sense, an ecstasy of the infinite is her cause. It turns in us to finite loves and lusts, to enlarge life's room and scope and pleasure's range, to battle and overcome and make one's own, the hope to mix one's joy with others' joy, a yearning to possess and be possessed, to enjoy and be enjoyed, to feel, to live. Here was its early brief attempt to be, its rapid end of momentary delight whose stamp of failure haunts all ignorant life. Inflicting still its habit on the cells the phantom of a dark and evil start ghost-like pursues all that we dream and do. Although on earth are firm established lives, a working of habit or a sense of law, a steady repetition in the flux, yet are its roots of will ever the same, these passions are the stuff of which we are made. This was the first cry of the awaking world. It clings around us still and clamps the God. Even when reason is born and soul takes form, in beast and reptile and in thinking man it lasts and is the fount of all their life. This too was needed that breath and living might be. The spirit in a finite ignorant world must rescue so its prisoned consciousness forced out in little jets at quivering points from the inconscience sealed infinitude. Then slowly it gathers mass, looks up at light. This nature lives tied to her origin, a clutch of nether force is on her still, out of unconscious depths her instincts leap, a neighbor is her life to insentient naught. Under this law an ignorant world was made. In the enigma of the darkened vasts, in the passion and self-loss of the infinite when all was plunged in the negating void, non-being's night called if being had not plunged into the dark carrying with it its triple mystic cross. Invoking in world-time the timeless truth, bliss changed to sorrow, knowledge made ignorant, God's force turned into a child's helplessness can bring down heaven by their sacrifice. A contradiction founds the base of life, the eternal, the divine reality has faced itself with its own contraries. Being became the void and conscious force nescience and walk of a blind energy and ecstasy took the figure of world pain. In a mysterious dispensation's law, a wisdom that prepares its far-off ends planned so to start her slow eonic game. A blindfold search and wrestle and fumbling clasp of a half-seen nature and a hidden soul, a game of hide-and-seek in twilit rooms, a play of love and hate and fear and hope continues in the nursery of mind, its hard and heavy romp of self-born twins. At last the struggling energy can emerge and meet the voiceless being in wider fields, then can they see and speak and, breast to breast, in a larger consciousness, a clearer light, the two embrace and strive and each know each regarding closer now the playmate's face. Even in these formless coilings he could feel matter's response to an infant stir of soul. In nature he saw the mighty spirit concealed, watched the weak birth of a tremendous force, pursued the riddle of Godhead's tentative pace, heard the faint rhythms of a great unborn muse. Then came a fierier breath of waking life, and there arose from the dim gulf of things the strange creations of a thinking sense, existences half real and half dream. A life was there that hoped not to survive, beings were born who perished without trace, events that were a formless drama's limbs and actions driven by a blind creature will. A seeking power found out its road to form, patterns were built of love and joy and pain and symbol figures for the moods of life. An insect hedonism fluttered and crawled and basked in a sunlit nature's surface thrills, and dragon raptures, python agonies crawled in the marsh and mire and licked the sun. Huge armored strengths shook a frail quaking ground, great puissant creatures with a dwarfish brain, and pygmy tribes imposed their small life drift. In a dwarf model of humanity nature now launched the extreme experience and master point of her design's caprice, luminous result of her half-conscious climb on rungs twixt her sublimities and grotesques to massive from infinitesimal shapes, to a subtle balancing of body and soul, to an order of intelligent littleness. Around him in the moment beats of time the kingdom of the animal self arose, where deed is all and mind is still half-born and the heart obeys a dumb unseen control. The force that works by the light of ignorance, her animal experiment began, crowding with conscious creatures her world scheme, but to the outward only were they alive, only they replied to touches and surfaces and to the prick of need that drove their lives. A body that knew not its own soul within, there lived and longed, had wrath and joy and grief, a mind was there that met the objective world as if a stranger or enemy at its door, its thoughts were kneaded by the shocks of sense, it captured not the spirit in the form, it entered not the heart of what it saw, it looked not for the power behind the act, it studied not the hidden motive in things nor strove to find the meaning of it all. Beings were there who wore a human form, absorbed they lived in the passion of the scene, but knew not who they were or why they lived, content to breathe, to feel, to sense, to act. Life had for them no aim save nature's joy in the stimulus and delight of outer things, identified with the spirit's outward shell, they worked for the body's wants, they craved no more. The veiled spectator watching from their depths fixed not his inward eye upon himself nor turned to find the author of the plot, he saw the drama only and the stage. There was no brooding stress of deeper sense, the burden of reflection was not borne, mind looked on nature with unknowing eyes, adored her boons and feared her monstrous strokes. It pondered not on the magic of her laws, it thirsted not for the secret wells of truth, but made a register of crowding facts and strung sensations on a vivid thread. It hunted and it fled and sniffed the winds, or sloathed inert in sunshine and soft air. It sought the engrossing contacts of the world, but only to feed the surface sense with bliss. These felt life's quiver in the outward touch, they could not feel behind the touch the soul. To guard their form of self from nature's harm, to enjoy and to survive was all their care. The narrow horizon of their days was filled with things and creatures that could help and hurt, the world's values hung upon their little self.